What made you realize there was something off about your friend's significant other? Hello and welcome to Robots Reading Reddit. The original thread is linked below if you want to check it out. By user as is no warranty. Was best friends with a dude. I'm a lady. Had been for a few years. Never any chemistry or anything like that, at least on my end. He gets out of a long-term relationship, starts dating around. He'd often introduce me to these ladies as sort of a barometer of whether or not he thought they were a good match. One weekend he invited a girl out with our group. She's super standoffish, will not smile, clearly isn't having a good time. I try to talk to her, get to know her, try to tell her about my friend and how great he is. She acts like I'm not there. Might as well have been the wallpaper. A month later I'm on a date and we run into them. Remember, I'm also on a date with a man. As they are leaving they come over to say hello. She seems equally unhappy to be alive. I introduce my dude, the three of us chat for a minute. While she stands there, I jokingly tug at his shirt in a "you old dog" kind of way. She storms out of the restaurant. Both dudes are confused. Was not a flirty touch of any kind, more like a bro touch. Anyway, next day at work, I work with this guy. He comes up to me and says, "Hey, you can't do stuff like that. She's really damaged. Has jealousy issues. Doesn't trust men." I apologize profusely because I didn't realize I had done anything wrong. Even asked my date, and he was baffled as well. This friend had an emergency key to my house in case I ever got locked out. He returned it a week later, citing something about what if you call at 2 AM. But isn't that the point? Isn't that what best friends do? Help each other in times of need? Flash forward a few months in. He refuses to speak to me. Again, we work together. Won't look me in the eye. He slowly gives up other relationships, male and female. After dating the girl for 6 months, they get engaged. Now married. No idea how it's going, or if he's happy. I ended up moving, and haven't spoken to him since. Makes me really sad to see people give up who they are for a relationship. This is a pretty good middle of the road kind of post for this thread. It will probably just get way worse though, because I'm the one picking the stories. Enjoy this carnival of bad decisions. By user Dragon Knight 0. A bit of background. This was a good friend of ours and previous roommate. At this point he'd moved out about a year and a half prior and we'd only had internet contact with him since. It was a meetup of old friends when we went to visit home. This was the first time we, wife and I, met his newest girlfriend after his previous long-term relationship ended. She wasn't so bad, kind of giggling and goofy for him since he's a bit more serious, but fine. They seemed happy. We were out for dinner and her and my wife go off to the bathroom. I thought this was odd, since my wife is kind of a tomboy and doesn't do the whole girls go to the bathroom to do their makeup and gossip thing, but I find out later friends SO invited her to ask her a few questions about our friend. Well, after about 20 minutes went by, I realized they weren't back yet. We were both tipsy and engaged in conversation and time got away. This was a small gathering of a few couples, and one of the other girls goes to check on them. Come to find out, friends SO basically had my wife cornered in the bathroom, crying in her face, and demanding to know why our friend had a secret crush on my wife, and why he wouldn't admit it to her. After getting the recap from my wife, she said she had no clue if the girl was going to attack her or molest her, since a few times she was apparently completely against her to the wall. Apparently it was a mixture of my wife wanting to calm her down, and also a little afraid, since she was half this girl's size and legitimately couldn't get past her. That caused the long drawn out issue. Luckily the person going to check on them snapped the girl out of it and diffused the situation. Very bizarre. We've seen her one time since, not exactly on purpose, and she acts like the whole thing didn't happen. She apparently has no history of mental illness, but I have no clue beyond that. A shorter post from user Squeaky Pop. Oh boy, he showed abusive and manipulating behavior from day one. But it was fine, because she loved him, and she could change him. A year later he had cheated at least once, and was constantly threatening to kill himself if she left him. It was fine though, because really he loved her, but didn't know how to express it. Year 2 and he controlled her Facebook and phone, and he decided who she could and couldn't talk to. It was romantic though, because he just really cared about her. Year 3 and he cheated at least 4 times and he'd also pretended to kill himself and break up with her multiple times each, after one of which she tried to kill herself. We had a whole intervention thing while she was in the hospital and she agreed to leave him. 2 weeks later they were back together. He spent $800 on my birthday gift. How could he not love me? Oh yeah, and I can't talk to you anymore, squeaky pop, because he says I shouldn't. She's still with him. By user tat regret throw. When he started trying to pick fights with me in order to separate me from my cousin. We were in our mid-teens. He looked 17 or 18. Very clean cut and geeky in a boy band sort of way, you know, the sensitive one with the glasses. He was well mannered, respectful to our moms, but he seemed predatory to me. I didn't have the best people around me growing up, so I learned to recognize potential threats early, and this guy set off all my danger bells. Just small things, like watching too closely to see how people reacted to him, and the way his smile never reached his eyes. I wasn't rude, but I didn't fawn over him either. Once he realized that I wasn't charmed by him, he started avoiding me, telling her he didn't feel comfortable around me and she'd have to see him alone. He tried bullying me anytime he saw me, while still bragging to me that he was her protector and her white knight. Found out a few months later that he was actually in his mid-20s and had a record for stalking and assaulting underage girls. Too bad we didn't know this before he gave her herpes. By user King Hawkeye. My best friend started to date this girl about a year ago. She was awesome, always seemed so nice, and was very fun to be around. About 3 months into the relationship, and everything was going great. Then he asked her to move in with him. The day comes to move in, and I go over to help move the heavy stuff and lo and behold, she shows up with a 5-year-old. When he asked who it is she said her son. We were blown away. She never mentioned it, said anything about having a kid. Her Facebook had 0 pics of her kid. No one mentioned her kid. It was a big cover up, and she basically just wanted someone to support her and her kid. He noped out of that one right then and there. What do you even say when someone you've known for 3 months just brings a kid on the day you're moving in together? I don't even know how to begin that conversation. By user Stiffisky. He had a full-on, toddler-level temper tantrum twice at a group game night. Once because during a trivia question he couldn't remember the planets in the solar system. Then, in the same night, he got pissy playing Uno, threw his cards down and stormed out. We all kind of looked at each other and at our friend. That was when we knew he was off. My friends and I were all in our mid-20s, and he was over 30, so it was definitely not acceptable behavior. A couple weeks later was my friend's birthday, so we all went out for the night and ended up at our neighborhood bar. He threw another temper tantrum. I think it was over scoring 4 darts or something equally ridiculous. Stormed out and peeled away in his car, leaving us with no ride home. This was pre-Uber/Lyft and none of us wanted to spend the money on a taxi, so we sobered up on the 2-mile walk back to my friend's house. Thankfully, she broke up with him not long after. She is now with a wonderful guy, who not only knows the planets of the solar system, but also treats her a lot better. Before I read the last post of the video, I would like to tell you guys about another post I stumbled upon while going through this thread. I highly suggest you go read it if you like this thread. It's about a crazy woman who believes her husband is monitoring her all the time. So if you have a few minutes to spare and want a more fleshed out story similar to the posts you've heard in this video, the link is in the description. By user Serafina Pekala. My best friend's ex-boyfriend walked like he was trying to intimidate people, and every time he asked someone a question about someone's opinion, "Hey, what do you think of that statue? Do you like sauerkraut?" he'd respond to their answer with, "I had a feeling you were going to say that." It seems harmless, but it was every single time, and if you called him out on it, you couldn't possibly have known I was allergic to X. He lashed out in anger. Every time she tried to break up with him he cornered her and wouldn't let her leave the room until she relented, and even their couples therapist thought she should leave him for her own safety after 2 or 3 sessions. He would wait for her shift to end, just sitting in his car in the parking lot, and if she didn't come out fast enough he'd storm into the building in a fury, but if she came out on time he'd just leave. He wasn't there to pick her up, just to monitor her, which he also did through a GPS tracker he put in her car. She now has a restraining order and has moved twice. He broke into her apartment with a gun while she was deep asleep and just snuggled up behind her with the gun between them, as if it was his dick, and that was how she woke up. There are other things, but this is getting long. Edited because people are curious about other things he did. Helped me move, but only to find out where I lived. After their breakup he came to my door several times looking for her, and when she was generally not here he settled for monitoring my house. Extreme fitness nut who was obsessed with telling people whether or not he could bench them. Hint, usually not. Lots of gaslighting. Don't remember the details. Insisted on changing her cat's name, which didn't stick. Wouldn't let her not watch TV with him, even though there are 100 things she'd rather do than watch TV at any given time, up to and including a pap smear. This inspired multiple fights. Charmed her parents so successfully that they insisted she go to couples therapy to work out their differences, which were, I don't want to be constantly monitored. Also your general controlling behavior is creepy. Versus you have nothing to hide if you're doing nothing wrong. Ultimately their breakup was supervised by the couple's counselor, who had building security waiting in the lobby and her hand on a panic button, who knew she'd have that. Stormed into her work when she quit, post-breakup, because he decided they fired her, and his plan was apparently to threaten them to get her job back. Took her to court to argue against the restraining order. Judge looked at friend's documentation and how she was leaning away from him even on opposite sides of the room, and he was making kissy faces at her, and granted the order. Made very public posts on some weightlifting social media thing about what a crazy ex-girlfriend he had, and linked her profile in his own profile. That's it for today. Thanks for watching.